Good morning, or good afternoon, or good midday to all of you. As Chris mentioned, this is Declare for Mobile, Asset and Instructional Design for Mobile Devices. And the goal really for this particular session is to, one, give a preview for the conference that's coming up in November, or October, I'm sorry. And the other thing is to really get into the instructional design side of the mobile. The mobile device field is so about the technical platforms and what we can do, what we can't. And what I've been working to do is really figure out how can we design within that environment. So where there is going to be talk of tools and things we should do, but also how we're going to actually go about accomplishing building things in that tool so they're useful. So just real quickly here, just a little bit about me. 15 years as a multimedia graphic e-learning development expert. I've been in a lot of places, setting up a lot of programs, doing a lot of things. I'm also an associate professor of communication studies and computer graphics and web design. And in the last 8 or 9 years, I spent a lot of time doing learning management and implementation design. And part of that learning management is actually cross-platform, whether what devices we're talking to what, how we were doing that, and now mobile is in the mix as well, as everybody's aware. So the first thing I'd actually like to do is I want to do a quick comparison, a little bit of analogy here, and see what we can learn from it. So instructor-led courses are a lot like a house. Okay, we spend 12 to 16 hours in that house. Okay, they're highly flexible. In other words, we can rearrange rooms and we can do things that we want to do. We can spend a lot of time. The instructor in that class, for example, can do things in the classroom, hang things on the walls, write things on the boards. So they're highly flexible. We spend a lot of time in there. And then the priorities in a house are to eat, obviously the toilet and the bath, sleep, live, and play. And we basically live in that house. We do everything in that house. Well, that's a lot like a classroom course where you spend a week, for example, 2-3 days to a week, and you're in that classroom, and basically you live there for the entire week. And the instructor is the engagement point, the part that keeps you excited, the person that keeps you interested in what's going on, but also directs the priorities, keeps things flexible, and controls the entire environment. Now the interesting thing is now we go to e-learning, which many of us have experience with, and in year 2000, 2001, we went from CBT to e-learning because of bandwidth and other things that had increased. And now that house, although has a lot of the same priorities, we are constrained to some degree. We have the classroom, which is highly flexible, spend a lot of time. But now, in an RV camper, this might be a fifth wheel, for example, a trailer, we only spend 6 to 8 hours. Notice that we're about half the time that we spent before, and really only the priorities are covered. We really, we're going to eat, use the toilet and sleep. As a matter of fact, if we want to bathe, we might have to go somewhere else. There is a shower in this particular RV, but a lot of them don't have that. And so we might have to go somewhere else to get that information. So what that's like is that we take e-learning, and somebody used to say, well, how do we take an 8-hour e-learning course, or 8-hour instructor-led course, a one-day course, and convert that to e-learning? Well, it doesn't equal 8 hours of e-learning on the other side. It usually equals 2.5, 3 hours, maybe a little more, a little less. But because we've had to really make things more efficient, we've also really looked at our priorities and what was the most important. So, where the house or the instructor-led class is very flexible and robust, the e-learning environment is more constrained, but we're really sticking to our guns and our priority, just like the camper where we're going to eat, sleep, and do those things, right? Well, when we go to mobile, okay, it's very much the same idea, but now we've gone from, a house to an RV. Now we're in a camper situation, a highly efficient place to be, okay? And on average, when people go camping in a camper, they spend about up to 6 hours in the camper per day, is what the research showed me. And most of that is actually sleeping time. So really, you don't spend most of your time in here. You only go to the camper when you need it. And that's very much, to me, like mobile learning, is that we go to the mobile device when we're in the right place at the right time, and when we need that information right then, right there. Yes, there may be longer platforms or longer courses and things that we can do, but really, we spend less time there. and the priorities change as well. It's less flexible, but the priorities really in the camper are to eat and sleep, okay? And those are the primary pieces. And so there may be other things we want to do similar to the house where we want to play and we want to use the toilet in the bathroom and those kinds of things. But in a camper, we may have to go elsewhere. And that means that mobile, very similar to a mobile device, our priorities are different. So we do the most needed things, the highest priority, but then we may need supporting sites, supporting information in other places to fill in the gaps. But is it any less useful? No. This is great in the sense that it gives us a chance to go out in the wilderness and camp and do the things we need, just like mobile learning will give us the priorities, give us that information quick that we need, but we may have to have supporting materials and other things that go with it. So I hope you've enjoyed that, a little analogy from the house, highly flexible, lots of, where the instructor is the engagement factor, lots of priorities. The camper, where we have more constraints, but we stick to our priorities. And then finally, mobile, where we have fewer options on things. However, we do stick to our priorities and we can get the job done. Now, generally, if this wasn't a webinar, I would ask for comments there. I found that to be an interesting analogy, and that came out last year at DevCon, and I thought I would write that up for you guys. Now, regarding priorities for mobile, I always have a little bit of word of warning because I've been in a lot of places where people are jumping into new technologies and they're marching ahead. And I absolutely, I'm the guy that's first in line to get new technology and how can I use that to improve my classes, to improve my e-learning. The thing about mobile right now is you have to think about your environment and what you really can do and what you can't. And so let's just kind of walk through. So, just like we have to decide what those priorities are in that camper, if you will. Now, here are some things to consider for your content before you really jump into a mobile program. And some of you have already gone down this path, and you keep pulling in every webinar and every resource you can to get more information. But so some of you have already done this, but have the content. Do you have content that is suited for mobile delivery? And then we'll talk about that, what that means here in a little while. Also, do you have an audience that needs mobile information? I mean, most of the time, if your audience is primarily in front of a machine, a PC or a Mac or whatever it may be, and they're there, 7, 8 hours of the day, and they're only on their mobile phones or on their mobile devices when they need them, do you really need mobile at that point? The other thing is that mobile is really part of an overall strategy. And so do you have an e-learning strategy that includes other forms of content? So if we go back to the example of the camper where we have, we can sleep and we can eat in there, but we need other resources, facilities, and other things that we may need. Do you have a strategy wrapped around your mobile to support that? For example, does your LMS support SCORM and tracking from your mobile devices? Do you have supporting sites where they can go get more information for that kind of stuff? So are you building an entire strategy? And one of the things I like to go back to is just like many people have a home and they have a camper, an RV, and some even have a travel camper. It's a mixture of these things, right? That you may have instructor-led, you may have e-learning, and you may have some mobile parts, and they all work together in a singular strategy. One of the things that was a misnomer about 10 years ago was that e-learning would replace training. I think we've all seen that that's not the case. It actually gives a different level of training where we still have instructor-led classes, and that's very important. And then we have e-learning classes that are more efficient, give us more information in a shorter period of time, but we can review that information over and over again. And finally, now we can add mobile to that strategy as well. So we'll have some instructor-led, that's important. We'll have some e-learning that's more robust, and then we'll have that mobile learning that's high priority and efficient and vital information. And so is it part of that overall strategy? Do you need to track your interactions from mobile platforms? Yes or no? And this is important because is your LMS keeping up, or do you have a way to track that structure? And then the last two is, do you have a content manager for mobile? Because developing content for mobile devices is different than developing content for e-learning and for instructor-led. And do you have a mobile web developer? It's very important that you have somebody that understands the mobile technology and how to develop for the browser and the mobile device. So these are some questions that you should think about And and many of you may be researching and saying, should I go mobile? Well, here's some of the questions that if I were to walk into your office, I would ask you today, and I would work through these with you. Now, one of the things, some of you may have seen this before at a conference or even on the webinar, but declare the methodology here. And just quickly, let me go through the declare model because what I've done is I've taken declare and I've applied it to the mobile platform a little bit later. But first in declare, we have discover, which is your needs, your analysis, objectives, and SME management. And really, this is how what are you teaching and why are you teaching it? And the one thing that will come up a little bit later is that for mobile, you really have to decide, what's your purpose with that mobile, because those priorities are extremely important to make that course work. Then we have the engage, and this is where, how do we get the learner's attention and how do we show benefit? It's extremely important that we show adult learners relevance and benefit. Why are they sitting here and what are they going to get out of it? And I think in the mobile world, it's even more important to engage them with that vital information that they need. Then we have conceptualize and load, which basically work together. And the interesting thing about conceptualize is that in the mobile world, one of the things I'm going to be a proponent of is using very little text. Now, we may have to use it for explanation, a couple sentences on the screen kind of thing, but most of the information is taught through models. And these are graphical displays, flow charts, other things that are, and it may take time to develop those models, and you have to get people to draw those models, but you can use them over and over again, and it really helps show process and flows of information. So I'm not saying that you take out all text, but you try to limit it as much as possible. Can you imagine reading an entire course through text on your phone, for example? And by the way, and when I'm talking about mobile, I talk a lot about phones, although we do have the pad, iPad, and the tablet platforms as well, but they generally have full browser access, so it's a little bit different from that standpoint. And then conceptualize, so effective models. And then we load, and that's where we use the model. We may sequence a model with text to show how the model works. Then we activate and recall, which are two pieces that work together. In other words, we get them to engage in the course itself. And in the e-learning world, we use Flash for this because we get a lot of great interactivity games, button pushes, rollovers, all those kinds of things. And this is part of the area that is a struggle in the instructional design for mobile, is because we lose some of that. But we have worked through some methods of giving some more interaction beyond just clicking to the next screen, but some strategies for building in interactivity. And then evaluate, learner retention, performance improvement. And so one of the things we'll talk about on the mobile side is how are you going to evaluate what they're doing on their mobile device, and is it effective, and is it changing performance? So that's the declare model in brief. And if you want more information on that, you'll see my email at the end. It's one of those things that I've been telling some of you that there's a book coming, and there is, but it's, they take time. But if you want more information on declare, this has actually worked well for many different organizations, and I can show you how to use this at a later time. So what made e-learning possible? Well, the reason I bring this up is because we went from computer-based training, which was on CD-ROM, and we would just sort of blast CDs out to everybody, and we hoped they would use them. But what really made e-learning possible were these things, that we had better web standards, and we had browser standards, and they were working together so we'd get a consistent experience no matter what browser or computer platform you were on. And then we got rich media tools and rich development tools. So we got rich media and Flash and Director and those kinds of things, and then we got the development tools to match. And all of a sudden we had this convergence of technology that allowed us to build these great environments. One of the things about mobile learning right now, and I'm sure that any of you have been researching it, is that what we're struggling for is a consistent platform and a consistent development environment. The phones keep changing, the devices keep, the platforms keep changing, and they take certain kinds of media and others take other kinds of media, and the development tools are changing and evolving all the time as well. And although we do have some standards with HTML5, XHTML, CSS, JavaScript, the world keeps moving around and people keep developing products to help So we're in that sort of middle period before all these things come true for mobile, but we're getting closer every day. So one of the things you may find is that right now you may be, you really need that mobile program, you really need it to work, but it may take a long time to get your content together, but in a couple of years from now it may come together very, very well and very easy because the standards change, the platforms change, and sort of the tools. And I think that's where we are currently. Now, one of the things I want to bring up is that these are the things that I consider all forms of e-learning content. Documents, books, articles, websites, audio, podcasts, web, teleconference, video, animation, synchronized with images and audio, flash, interactive animations, tracking, scoring, reporting, etc. So all these things when I go to say, okay, when I'm going to design a course, these are all the things that I may use. Okay, so when I go back to that house example, this is everything in the house that I can use. And when I go to e-learning, I kind of pull off the shelf and I pull these in to that environment. And then when I go to mobile, I can do the same thing. The one thing I want to bring up and I want to show you is that if this is everything, then these are the things that sort of we are constrained to some degree on the mobile side, and we have to be aware of, and how do we work with them, and how do we do instructional design with some of these constraints. Now, don't get me wrong, let me be very clear, I think you can do some great instructional design on the mobile side and do some very, very nice courses. But you do lose, we're going to that camper again, there's just some priorities that we have to work with, and we do have some technical constraints. For example, that camper may not have a bathroom. So if it doesn't have a bathroom, then what do? Well, here's the same. We lose synchronized images with audio in the Flash, like Flash Player, on some mobile devices. We have it in others. But these are the things that we struggle with consistently as we go. So kind of be aware of that. Biggest thing is, obviously animation. We've gotten very used to having animation in our courses, so we lose some of that. However, we do have video, and one of the things that they did in the mobile world is they made video accessible very quickly. So, most of those animations can get converted to video, and they can run in that environment. But there are some considerations there as well. And then, although one of the things I said, flash.swf there, although animation is possible, Adobe has actually come out with some Flash tools that allow you to convert animation. It does not convert the audio, but converts the animation to HTML5 and JavaScript, and it seems to work pretty well. And that's actually one of the things we talk about if you come to DevCon in October. And then interactive animations. This is one of the biggest struggles, is that unless you go to a game platform or you have a standard API, you're going to lose out on some of the interactive pieces. But when I talk about some instructional design here in a little while, I think we'll get some of that back. And then tracking. And you don't lose tracking absolutely, but it's a consideration where you have to think, does your LMS support it? How are you going to get that data back to the server for support and for tracking purposes? All right, and in just a second, I'm going to take a break and see if there are any questions. But let me finish the next couple of slides, and then we'll move forward. So currently, mobile is really best suited for as-needed or right-time training. Right? It's kind of a reference where I go and I get the information I need right then. And some people have mentioned, like, CPR instructions or how to wire a diagram or those kinds of things. And I agree with that. So, mobile is processes, reference, new messaging. For example, can you got a message from a CEO talking about new things that are coming out or new training, those kinds of things. That can all come from the mobile device and actually works very, very well. Then we have the content. We got to make sure that the content available is brief and vital. And so that's where we really get into those priorities where it's got to be information that they have to see now and that it works well for them right then. You really don't want them scrolling through pages and pages and pages of material to find things. You want them to be able to get right to it immediately. And so one of the instructional design pieces there is how do you build your menus so they can find stuff very, very quickly. And a lot of times I even think on a phone, doing a search is okay. To me, that's a second line. But designing a menu that actually allows them to jump to information very quickly is very important. And then the last thing here is that a lot of the material will be demonstration-centric. I'm going to show you something. Although I've worked out some interactivity structures that allow the user, basically these menu structures, to kind of work their way through a course and be more interactive that way. And then I always, and as I mentioned earlier, the final thing is best suited. So you're using mobile learning as an expansion of your overall e-learning strategy. That, you know, we've got the house, we've got some e-learning, you know, we got the big RV, and then we got the little camper that's brief and efficient and vital for us. So when we talk about from a big picture standpoint, you know, mobile design, stick to the basics for consistent results. Now, if you're all on the same platform, let's say, for example, you're not on the iPhone and you're on some of the other platform phones or mobile devices that support Flash, you know, look at your platform. What does it support and build to that? Perfect. But for consistent results, if you're building courses for multiple platforms, different phones, different tablets, different kinds of things like this, then stick to the basics. Text, images, and it's weird to say that video is a basic, but it is. Video, audio. Now, it won't be synchronized unless it's in the video. It won't be animation and audio. It's just audio podcast, for example, and XHTML and CSS. And that XHTML is HTML5 all works together. But stick to those basics, and you can build some really nice courses with some good material. And one of the things I say over and over again is that if the information is relevant and beneficial to the user, then they will go through it. That's the key, is that you can blast out all kinds of content and say, we have 27 courses on mobile, but are they valuable? If the information is valuable, the format is actually less important than what's there, and the user will come back to it over and over again. The last thing I'll just briefly mention here, and this is one of the things we're going to talk about in October a great deal, is know your dimensions. Because when you're designing these screens, you're doing web design. So, for example, on the iPhone, which is one of the things I have, which causes the problems for most things, is, you know, the dimensions are 480 by 320 to 163 ppi. So one of the things that we'll do is we'll go through a spec analysis for the phones that you're working with, and we'll help you design for that environment. And that's why I have that know your dimensions note there at the bottom. So let me take a brief break here. I'm going to hop out of this, and I'm going to see if there are questions that anybody may have. So give me just a second. Let me get on my, so I can see. Bear with me for just a second. All right, so I'm just looking through some of the questions. Okay, so I didn't see any questions there. I'll see if Chris can open it up towards the end. Maybe we can have some come in. So it looks like things are going well. All right, so I'll hop back into the presentation. And thank you for that brief interlude there. Oops. Let me find my spot real quick. Okay, so we were, now one of the things I want to bring up is that we talked about declare a little bit earlier, discovery, engage, conceptualize, load, activate, recall, and evaluate. And so what I wanted to bring up is just some thoughts on the mobile side, and then I'll get into the actual looking at some of the, and explain some of the different instructional design methodologies here. But on the discovery side for declare is that for mobile, more than anything else is what are your priorities on the mobile side. You're not going to take an 8-hour course and convert it to mobile. So you got to find out in that 8-hour course, or in that 3-hour e-learning course, or whatever it may be, what are the primary pieces that they need quick access to that are vital to them in the field, that's going to help them do their job, that's going to change their performance. So you have to really, really think about that and break that down. And so a lot of times what I've done in the past is that, we had an instructor-led course, and then I write the priorities and I write the objectives for the e-learning course, and then I come down a level and I write the ones for the mobile, and I just keep pulling the most important things down the chain. Okay, and as they come down the chain, then I see what filters through. And I recommend that you would do the same thing, is that you brainstorm, if you were to teach this in the class, what would you do? And then if you were to sort of break this down where you did have interactivity, animations, and all those kinds of things, what would you do? And then when you come down to mobile, with the size of the screen and all those kinds of things, what's the most important thing? And break it down that way. Because you're not going to go straight from an instructor-led to a mobile and expect to carry all the content. If you do, that's okay, but they're going to spend a lot of time looking at a smaller device, unless it is a pad of some kind. But so take a look at that. The other thing is, how will you support it? If we can't do everything on the mobile device, okay, then what are you going to put around it to support that device? So go back to the camping example. So I've got my camper and I can eat and I can sleep, but what if I want to go do something, I want to play around with something, or I want to go take a shower, for example? Well, you got to put those things, those courses around it, those materials around it to help support it, because there are going to be holes in knowledge that come through. It's just, even if you build a full course where you put every bit of content in the mobile, it's going to be very difficult for somebody to look at a small device for 6 hours and read through all of that at once. So part of it is just the part of the user, the learner, not accessing the information as consistently. So there's going to be holes in knowledge. So how are you going to support that? How are you going to check that? So that's the discovery side. So those are sort of the priorities at the beginning. And then on the engage side, this is where we talked about and declare that you want to always show benefit, relevance, and you want to get their attention. Okay. So what is a way that we can get their attention and show relevance and benefit? And one of the things that, as I was working through this, if you're going to use video in one place in your course, let's say you're going to do text and images and they kind of have to read through things, but if you're going to use video in one place, I would make it this engage section where you have somebody talking about why they're here and get them excited about the course, because that's the one place that you can really dive in. Not only that, there's only one of them per course, and let's say, for example, you don't have anybody that really does video. Well, you can work your way and learn how to do one video per course if you wanted to do that. So that might be the one place that if you were going to add video but you don't really want to, that's where you might add it. So the other thing is have cool images and things, but because we can't sync audio and animations like we can with Flash, and a lot of the platforms are not consistently, then video would work great there. On the conceptualize and load side, some basic things that we can do is we can do model sequencing. In other words, we build the model and we show it on the screen. It's just a series of images that comes in. It's basically slow animation, if you will, with explanation text, so we can kind of build on information as we go. We also use text and images, and then we can have supporting videos. So let's say, for example, they could either click a video and watch it, and then they can kind of read through some stuff and think about the mode of instruction that's changing. So I've got them with video, and then I kind of go back and support that with text and images, or I can reverse it. They can kind of read through some stuff and then show a video to kind of tie all that together. So there's some different ways to load information from that standpoint. Then we have the activate and recall, which is really the interactivity piece. Where do we want them to make decisions? And also, where do we want them to realize they made mistakes? And that's the recall portion. So one of the things you can do is that a lot of times people think of interactivity as just being the next. How do I click the next button to go to the next screen or the back button? But one of the things you can do is you can build, we hear a lot about scenarios. Well, I think mobile devices is one of the perfect places to use scenarios, because it allows the user to make decisions, and they're using a navigation structure, but technically we're not constrained by it, which means that we can build those menus. So we can build the choose your own adventures, if you will, and they can go to screens based on decisions they're making. So that is they're making, so they're engaging with the content, they're making decisions. So from an instructional design standpoint, you may have some text and images, some video, and then they have to get to a decision tree and start making decisions. And it's all just HTML links to the next page. or what the next page should be based on their decision. And that's one of the things we're going to build in October. We're actually going to build a scenario with text, images, and video. And that, to me, that's one of the best ways that you can actually build interaction on the mobile devices consistently right now. And then, let's see, you can also have your users listen or watch a video and then answer questions. So they could watch a video, for example, and then based on what they click and go, they can either go take some, answer some quiz questions or some things like that, or they can make decisions in the course itself. And then finally evaluate. Form if your LMS supports it. And then one of the things you could do is link to an online test for later. Let's say, for example, they finish the course. Maybe it spawns an email with a link that takes them to a test once they get back to a machine, and those kinds of things as well. So there's some overview thoughts of things that you can do from the mobile side. And when we come together in October, we're actually going to build several of these examples of different menu structures and different ways of putting this together. And that includes video, putting together video, putting together audio. How do you make it all work? That's really the thrust of the conference. This is sort of the instructional design high level, but at the conference we're actually sit and build a lot of this stuff in that day that we have. So here are some briefs on some of the models that we're going to work with when we come together in October. So I am going to work with you to build your first mobile template. It's basically a standard web page on a mobile device. I will actually host you for that day, which means you'll have a place on my web server to do it. And you'll be able to put together basic images and text with a menu. And so the user will be able to click through and see the content. Then we're going to do model sequencing, which means that we have a model, and you will work through how to sequence that. And all of it is clicking the links to go to the next. So it sequences through. But there are some tips on. We can actually build some JavaScript to do some timing, where it'll actually change automatically, which we can talk about then as well. And then one of the things we're going to talk a lot about is actually video. How can you convert your own video to H.264 or mobile compliant video? So we'll be doing the mobile media encoder, Adobe Media Encoder and some others there. So we'll go through that. So we'll actually shoot some video in class, and we'll go through the conversion process. And then we'll actually do some scenario-based where we're doing HTML links and images, but they have to use the menu and select the appropriate choice to go to the next destination. So that's where we get in that more engagement and also interactive side. And then video scenario, which I thought would actually be really fun, is that the course is all video, but the decision tree is HTML. So they come in and somebody says, you're going into a you're going into a potential customer's office. You're about to make a sales call. Be sure that you have one of these, with you, and you click, for example, a backup of your PowerPoint or something like that. And it goes and says yes, and the video plays and says, hey, yes, you need a backup of your PowerPoint because it may not display, or you need a printout of your PowerPoint, or whatever it may be, but it's all video. So very little text and images. It's just the menu that drives what they're seeing when. And then finally, the animation with text explanation. This is some of the Adobe tools that have come out. You can convert Flash animation to this JavaScript and HTML5 animation. So the animation works well, and then you can use text explanation to explain what's on the screen from that standpoint. So the goal of the day that we're together, building assets, a handful of knowledge at the conference in October, is that we're actually going to be developing. We're going to use the theory, but we're going to actually sit down. You're going to build an HTML template, mobile template. You're going to do model sequencing. You're going to do HTML menus for video. We're going to do video, scenarios, etc. And then what I can do is I can help you build your flow, or what you think you would do for your audience in that mobile environment. And hopefully, usually in a room of 10 or more, we've got enough platforms, different phones, different mobile devices, that we can test those courses on those different mobile devices and see what's going on. So I think it'll be a good environment, but you will be developing. We'll be looking at Dreamweaver and some other tools, and in here in just a second. So there's some thought process there. All right, so one of the things I wanted to show you just briefly, a sample of something we may build, is something like this, a quick sequence model. So here's what would be a text image sequence. So here's your brain. You're now receiving stimuli, which is represented by the arrow. Because you can't take in every stimuli, you must select information. And we select information because it's relevant, unique, and repeated, and that controls the selection process. Then we organize that material. In other words, we put material in mental folders, and we begin to interpret that information. And we interpret, and this is apply meaning to that information. In other words, we make sense of it, and we make it part of us. So we've selected, we've organized, and we interpreted. Okay? And then we recall, interpret the information, and tell others. And so in the end, what that means is that our perception, I'm missing a text piece here, our perception really is our reality. Okay? So what I've done is I've used a basic model to display information. So I've conceptualized and loaded all in one place. Okay? So a simple example, but this is the kind of thing that we're going to be building, but we're going to add video and other things with it as well. All right, so some of the development tools to be thinking about, and some that I'm very excited about. On the sort of standard side, we've got Dreamweaver, HTML5, XHTML, and CSS. It does not have to be Dreamweaver. There are other HTML tools out there, but something that it's tools, we're going to be looking at a graphics tools. My personal favorite for developing web content is actually Fireworks. Although I am a Photoshop instructor and I love Photoshop, I use Fireworks to build interfaces and to build my designs, and I use them together, but we'll be going through that. Then we'll be looking at video and video media encoder, converting video to mobile formats, and also video editors that day. You'll need Acrobat if you want to do PDFs, which is another format that we've talked about. And then the mobile web tools, and actually we're going to go through several of these and talk about them, but really what are they doing is they're taking HTML5, CSS3, and JavaScript and working it together to build a website, in essence, that looks like a mobile application. There are several out there, JQ Touch, but I've been reviewing several others, so when we're done with that review, I'll have those for you in October, because I'm actually developing in several, but I know JQ Touch works. The other thing I'm actually very excited about, and it just right on the heels of all the mobile stuff that's coming out, is mLearning Studio for Rapid Intake, and you know, it really is where you can upload video, upload images, load your text, and it really does build both Flash or browser and mobile content at the same time. And one of the things I mentioned is it not only builds e-learning, but it actually really is a mobile website builder, which is great. It's also a hosted solution, which means all your assets are online, so we'll be working with that. So the good thing about October when we get there for the conference and that handful of knowledge and building assets is we're going to go through sort of all the manual steps of putting everything together, the instructional design behind it, kind of figuring out what works for you, and then we're also going to look at mLearning Studio so you can get an idea of how that can work for you as well, and then you'll have enough information to really start making decisions on how you're going to build courses. Most of you have already decided, hey, look, we need to do something mobile. Well, this course will actually allow you to get hands-on, let's build it, let's construct it, let's put it together, and make sure it works. So that's the idea there. So that's the last little bit for me. I'm going to take questions here in a second. You see my email up on the screen. I've been recently changing email, so I've put my Gmail account up there. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to discuss that with you. We're all in this together in the sense that I do the same things that you guys do. So that's a good thing. So let me take a look and see if there